The first pale light of morning seeped through the jungle canopy in 1944, turning mist into drifting silver. On a nameless Pacific island, a single American soldier lay pressed into damp earth, unmoving, his cheek resting against canvas darkened by sweat. In his hands was the rifle everyone had laughed at, a civilian purchase ordered from a catalog, unmarked by any armory stamp, unofficial in every sense that mattered to the Army. Across the clearing, death had already been busy. A radio operator lay silent beside shattered equipment. A medic never reached his wounded. An officer had fallen mid-command. The unseen enemy sniper had frozen the line so completely that even whispers felt dangerous. Supply runners refused to move. Orders stalled. Each passing minute meant another body, another delay, another erosion of confidence. The soldier slowed his breathing until it matched the rhythm of the jungle itself. He knew failure would not just cost a life, but the entire advance. If the sniper survived today, the terrain would remain locked, hostile, and lethal. Gently, deliberately, he eased the bolt forward. Metal whispered once, then stopped. By the end of 4 days, the jungle would feel emptier, but not quieter than before. Long before the war gave him a uniform and a serial number, he was simply a man who knew how to wait. He had learned patience in fields and tree lines, in the quiet hours before dawn when movement meant everything and haste meant failure. He was not shaped by drill fields or shouted commands, but by repetition, solitude, and the unforgiving standards of marksmanship where excuses carried no weight. Accuracy was not a theory to him, it was a habit earned shot by shot. Firearms to him were tools that rewarded understanding. He cleaned them meticulously, tuned them carefully, and learned their quirks the way others learned engines or instruments. Among them was the rifle that would later draw ridicule, a civilian bolt action praised by hunters for its precision, but dismissed by professionals for lacking battlefield pedigree. It was not rugged in appearance, not designed to impress, and not born from a military contract. He trusted it anyway, because he knew exactly how it behaved when everything else went quiet. When war came, there was nothing cinematic about his decision to serve. He enlisted because others did. He trained, followed orders, and blended easily into the mass of men preparing for something none of them fully understood. There were no predictions of distinction, no hint that he would be remembered at all. But he carried something with him that did not appear on any roster. Years of self-reliance, learned far from regulation manuals, were already shaping how he saw problems, solutions, and tools. Those habits would soon collide with the military's idea of what a soldier was allowed to trust. Military life introduced him to order, repetition, and rules enforced without exception. Rifles were issued, not chosen. They arrived in crates, identical down to the last stamped marking.
Approved by committees and tested for the average soldier, not the exceptional one. When he brought out his own rifle, the reaction was immediate. Some laughed openly, others shook their heads. A sergeant dismissed it as not combat-rated. A lieutenant called it a hunting toy. Another warned, without humor, "You'll get yourself killed with that." None of it was personal, and that made it worse. The system simply had no place for a weapon that did not come through official channels. The doctrine was clear. Standardization meant predictable training, interchangeable parts, shared ammunition, and simplified repairs under fire. Individual preference was treated as a liability. His rifle violated every assumption at once. Its scope mounts were unfamiliar. Its ammunition was non-standard. No armorer had spare parts. No manual explained its use. The resistance was not subtle. He was discouraged from carrying it in the field. Requests for specialized training were denied. The word sniper remained out of reach. reserved for men who followed approved pathways and carried approved tools. He was warned against what officers called cowboy thinking, the dangerous belief that personal skill could replace doctrine. Yet none of the objections addressed the one thing that mattered to him. Precision could not be standardized. Confidence could not be issued. He knew exactly what his rifle could do, even if no form recognized it. Each criticism hardened his resolve, because beneath the jokes and paperwork, he sensed a dangerous truth forming, one no regulation acknowledged, and one that would soon be exposed under fire, when lives depended on results, not approvals anymore. Then, the battlefield created a problem doctrine couldn't solve. The broader campaign offered no room for improvisation, yet demanded it all the same. Enemy snipers drawn from elite units had settled into the terrain with deliberate patience. They fired sparingly, choosing moments that maximized fear rather than body count. Camouflage dissolved them into foliage and shadow. Shots came late, often after hours of silence, teaching men that safety was an illusion. The effect was cumulative and corrosive. Casualties mounted not in dramatic waves, but in singles. A head above cover, a hand reaching for a radio. Units stopped moving during daylight. Officers learned to give orders from prone positions, faces pressed into mud. In some sectors, the sniper threat disrupted operations more effectively than mortar fire, slowing advances and draining morale without ever revealing its source. On command maps, the problem was clear. Jungle corridors narrowed into natural funnels. Ridgelines dominated approaches. Creek beds and clearings became killing zones no one could cross without inviting fire. This was not a battlefield of sweeping maneuvers or heroic charges. It was a war measured in yards, angles, and the ability to wait longer than the man hunting you.
Conventional responses failed. Suppressive fire wasted ammunition. Artillery could not target what could not be seen. Each solution assumed an enemy that behaved, and each assumption proved wrong. Command needed an answer, quickly, or the advance would stall indefinitely. And it was here, under this pressure, that rules began to loosen. This is where unconventional tools stop being a liability and start becoming necessary. The solution was never mystical, and it was never luck. It was mechanical, personal, and rooted in understanding. The rifle everyone mocked succeeded because it did exactly what its owner needed it to do, without compromise. Out of the box, it delivered consistent accuracy that standard service rifles struggled to match at extended distances. Its tolerances were tighter. Its barrel harmonics were predictable. Shots landed where they were expected to land. Equally important was familiarity. The trigger broke cleanly at a weight the protagonist had trained with for years. There was no adjustment period, no hesitation at the moment of truth. The scope was mounted to match his natural eye relief and shooting posture, not a regulation diagram. When he settled in behind it, nothing felt foreign, everything aligned. Ammunition mattered too. Civilian manufacturing favored consistency over mass output. Each round behaved like the last, reducing variables in an environment already full of them. That reliability was invisible to skeptics, but invaluable to someone counting heartbeats between shots. Standard issue rifles were built for durability, simplicity, and volume of fire. They excelled when conditions were chaotic and ranges uncertain. But counter-sniper work was neither chaotic nor forgiving. It demanded precision over punishment, restraint over noise. Where doctrine favored rugged tools for many hands, this moment required a refined instrument for one. His method reflected that philosophy. He selected positions not for visibility, but for patience. Fields of fire were chosen based on how an enemy moved, not where one might appear. He waited hours without shifting, watching patterns emerge. Snipers returned to habits, angles, and timings. He did not hunt targets, he studied behavior. The difference was like comparing a surgeon's scalpel to a general-purpose tool. Both had their place, only one belonged here. Every element worked together: rifle, shooter, environment, and time. Nothing was rushed, nothing was wasted. On paper, the idea challenged everything he had been warned against. In practice, it made perfect sense. The theory was sound. Now it had to survive contact. The first engagement unfolded without witnesses, drama, or urgency. Hours passed as the jungle breathed around him, insects humming, leaves shifting with false promises of movement. He waited, studying a narrow corridor where the enemy had fired before, trusting patterns over instinct. When the moment finally came, it was almost anticlimactic. A single adjustment, a controlled breath, one shot.
There was no return fire, no shout, just absence. Minutes stretched. The radio remained quiet. Eventually, word filtered back along the line. The sniper was down. Confirmation came slowly, cautiously, as patrols edged forward into ground that had been lethal only moments earlier. Men moved again, not boldly, but deliberately, testing each step as if expecting the jungle to object. Those who knew about the rifle said nothing. There was no cheering, no vindication. Instead, there was a subtle shift, a recalibration of belief. Something dismissed had worked. Something unapproved had delivered where sanctioned methods had failed. It was not a victory that ended the threat, and everyone understood that. One sniper did not mean safety, but it proved the idea under fire. Precision had found its mark, and doubt had been forced to retreat, if only slightly. The enemy noticed. Retaliation came quietly, the way all dangerous adjustments do. The enemy stopped repeating himself. Firing points shifted. Decoys appeared where bodies once fell, helmets propped on sticks, movement designed to draw impatient shots. Patrols widened, creeping through undergrowth with deliberate slowness, searching not for targets, but for the man changing the pattern. The protagonist responded by becoming less visible, not more aggressive. He abandoned positions after a single engagement, sometimes after none at all. Angles changed daily. Lines of sight were shortened, then extended again. He learned when not to shoot, recognizing that patience was now his most effective camouflage. Each decision carried weight because every mistake invited focused retaliation. Engagements grew harder. The enemy fired less, waited longer, and chose ground with greater care. What had been opportunity became contest. Hours passed without movement, muscles cramped, insects crawled unchecked. Still he waited, measuring time, light, and sound, until a habit revealed itself or a discipline cracked. When shots came, they were singular and final, followed by immediate displacement before answers arrived. Over several days, the results accumulated. Another sniper fell, then another. Each confirmation arrived quietly, passed along in restrained voices that carried equal parts relief and disbelief. There was no sense of momentum on the surface, only the gradual lifting of pressure as corridors reopened and observation posts regained confidence. The enemy adapted again, this time with intent. Patrols closed in, fire probed likely positions. Someone, somewhere, understood that a single marksman was dismantling their advantage, and orders were given to end it. The protagonist felt the shift in the air, the sense of being hunted rather than hunting.
He moved constantly now, sleeping in fragments, eating cold rations, trusting discipline to outrun attention. Every successful shot increased the danger of the next, yet the method held. Precision remained stronger than urgency, and restraint outlasted aggression. By the fourth day, the jungle felt different. It was not safer, only quieter, as fear retreated unevenly and confidence returned in cautious increments, signaling that something unseen had shifted permanently across the contested ground where silence now carried meaning again today. The culmination came without ceremony, recorded not in headlines but in reports and quiet acknowledgments. Over 4 days, the pattern was undeniable. One by one, enemy snipers were neutralized, each engagement measured, confirmed, and logged. The conditions shifted, the result did not. Freedom of movement returned to ground that had been paralyzed. Patrols crossed clearings in daylight again. Radios stayed active. Officers stood long enough to give orders. There was no single dramatic moment to point to, only accumulation. The sniper threat that had stalled the advance collapsed under sustained, precise pressure. What artillery could not reach and doctrine could not anticipate was dismantled shot by shot. Numbers mattered now. Multiple confirmed kills. 4 days, 1 rifle, 1 method. The sector stabilized, not because the enemy withdrew, but because their advantage was gone. Mockery ended quietly. No announcement was made, no apology offered. The rifle stopped being a joke. After the threat receded, the response from command was restrained but unmistakable. Questions replaced objections. Reports that once noted an unauthorized weapon now recorded results. The laughter disappeared, not dramatically, but completely, as if it had never been appropriate in the first place. No one ordered the rifle removed. No one asked him to explain himself in writing. Instead, officers began to ask how the positions were chosen, how long he waited, what he looked for before firing. The conversations were quiet, professional, and edged with something new: respect. The weapon that had drawn jokes was now treated as a tool that worked. With the sniper threat broken, operations resumed their rhythm. Patrols moved in daylight. Supply lines reopened. Medics reached the wounded sooner. Casualty rates fell, not because the fighting eased, but because uncertainty had been reduced. Confidence returned in increments, built on the knowledge that the unseen enemy no longer owned the terrain. The protagonist did not celebrate. He cleaned his rifle, checked his scope, and waited for the next assignment. Recognition came indirectly, in the absence of interference and the presence of trust. Doctrine remained intact, manuals unchanged, and procedures untouched. Doctrine didn't change, but minds did. What followed was service without spectacle. He remained at his post, employed where precision mattered and noise did not. His actions noted in after-action reports rather than speeches. There was no parade, no citation read aloud to a cheering formation. Recognition arrived as continued trust, the quiet decision to let him keep doing what he had proven he could do. The Army did not suddenly abandon standardization, but ideas have a way of seeping through cracks. Lessons from counter-sniper engagements circulated informally. Greater attention was paid to optics, to individual marksmanship, to the value of patience over volume. The philosophy mattered more than the specific rifle. What endured was the realization that skill, paired with understanding, could outperform approved solutions under the right conditions. When the war ended, he returned to a life that bore little resemblance to the jungle. He worked, raised a family, and spoke rarely of those days. To neighbors, he was unremarkable. To history, he was nearly invisible. The rifle followed him home, eventually stored away, its significance known only to the man who had trusted it when it mattered most. Stories like this seldom anchor textbooks. They exist between footnotes and footpaths, preserved by memory rather than monuments. Yet they shaped outcomes just as surely as grand offensives and famous names. Not all victories leave monuments. They linger instead in altered maps, fewer casualties, and the quiet survival of men who never learned the name of the person who saved them that day, there, then. Stories like this challenge how wars are remembered. They remind us that victory is not always delivered by the loudest weapon or the most decorated unit, but often by individuals who see problems clearly and refuse inadequate answers. Ingenuity mattered here. Skill mattered more than labels, and trust in craft proved stronger than mockery or regulation. This is why forgotten micro-histories deserve attention. They reveal how wars are actually fought, one decision at a time, by people whose names rarely survive paperwork. Preserving these stories is not nostalgia, it is understanding. If this story mattered to you, help rescue more like it. Like this video so these histories are not buried again. Subscribe to join a community committed to remembering them. Share in the comments where you're watching from or a family story worth telling. History isn't only shaped by what institutions approve, but by what individuals dare to trust today.